Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. And today let's continue doing this passage, this quiz on the website retheory.org. Alright, so the social contract. Passage 1. During the Age of Reason, humanity was in a state of transition. The old superstitions were proven wrong by science, and so some thinkers wondered if the old ways of organizing societies and governments were wrong too. To that end, philosophers began to develop and later debate the very natures of society, and three men in particular argued that society was in fact formed by something called the social contract. The social contract is an abstract agreement. No one technically signs it, but everything agrees to it informally. It is an agreement among the people of our society to cooperate with each other because it is mutually beneficial to do so. That is, it is in everyone's interest to work together. Thomas Hobbes first proposed the theory in his Leviathan from 1651. He argued that people were essentially evil in nature and entered society for mutual protection. To Hobbes, people give power to a monarch or a king because that person protected them. Okay, so here's a new word, mutual. Mutual here means common to or shared by two or more, like a mutual friend or a mutual person. Decades later, Jacques Locke adapted to the notion. He argued that people were free in nature and gave up political power in society. However, people joined the social contract to get protection for the natural rights of life, liberty, and property. He argued that the government's power derived from the people and that people should form a new government if the existing one does not protect those natural rights. Finally, just over 110 years after Hobbes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued in his The Social Contract that all the power of just a government comes from the people. That is, when one enters the social contract, he gives up his freedom but gets political power. Thus, in a little over a century, philosophers have switched. Where they once argued that people have little power in society, they were now arguing that the people had all of the power. Passage 2. To the men who formed the United States, only one thing was agreed upon. The British had broken the social contract with them. They may have disagreed about what they should do about it or later about what the new country looked like. However, they were certain that the king had not done what he was supposed to do. Thus, the Thomas Jefferson penned Declaration of Independence is primarily an explanation of how King George III had broken the contract. The first section of the document expresses the colonists believed that man had three essential natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It also expresses the belief that government power comes from the governed. The second section lists the English government's abuses on the colonists. They include keeping a standing army in a time of peace, disallowing representation in parliament, and suspending colony assemblies. Finally, the third section explains that the Americans have taken less extreme measures in the past, but that, finally, they were serving the bond, the social contract, with England. Okay, so now let's do the quiz. It's kind of abstract to learn about the social contract. Well, I just basically know that the social contract is a contract that people mutually agree with about their rights and to give the government to decide about their rights because they're afraid that they will be snapped away their rights for freedom, liberty, and mentioned here is the pursuit of happiness. But let's do the quiz. It can be inferred from the passage on at the age of reason. Here's a reason. Was possible only because of new science breakthroughs. Occurred in 17th to 18th century? Wait, what? Oh, I see. So these have to link between different contexts, different senses, and different information here. The other of passage 1 describes various arguments that took place during the Age of Reason, and he or she specifically describes the theories of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. While describing those men, The other mentions the work, stating that Leviathan was published in 1651. Here, Thomas Hobbes first proposed the theory in his Leviathan from 1651, and the social contract just over 110 years after Hobbes, meaning it was published in the 1760s. Okay, as these are texts of the Age of Reason, it follows that the Age of Reason occurred in the 16,000s and 17,000 of the 17th and 18th century, making choice A correct. Alright, understand. To the other of passage 2, which influenced the men who formed the United States, does suggest that the Age of Reason, specifically the social contract theory, inspired the men who formed the United States. Passage 1 does not mention the United States at all. As such, choice B is incorrect, since this question asks only about passage 1. Yeah, that's also correct too. Though the author of passage 1 does suggest that new thoughts in science are linked to the Age of Reason, he or she too implied that the new breakthroughs in science are part of the Age of Reason, not the cause of it. Thus, choice C is incorrect. Though the other passage 1 does cite Leviathan as a breakthrough work of the Age of Reason, he or she does not argue that it was the first book published as part of the Age of Reason, or that Hobbes triggered the Age of Reason. As such, choice D is incorrect. So the only choice that correct here is A. According to passage 1, the primary difference between the social contracts defined by Hobbes and Rousseau is that. Okay, so Hobbes, what is Hobbes? And Hobbes believed that the government cannot take away three things. Wait, what? Hobbes. He does not mention that. He does not mention that three things, but three things mentioned were mentioned by John Locke, not Hobbes. So we can eliminate the option A. B. Hobbes argued that one joins the social contract for protection. Yes, he does do that, while Rousseau argues that people give up their political power in joining the social contract. Nope, because he gives up his freedom, not his political power. So B can be considered to be eliminated. Let me see. Hobbes argued that man has natural rights. Okay, while Rousseau argues that man gives up his rights to join society. Hobbes argued that more power lies in the government. More power. Okay, I think D is the correct answer. Alright. As used in the world, in paragraph 2 of passage 1, the word abstract most nearly means, okay, you have to put this in context and in their certain situation, because maybe this word have numerous meanings. The social contract is an abstract agreement. Abstract mean theoretical means that it's really kind of invisible and not really clearly described. According to passage 2, each of the following is true about the Declaration of Independence except that. Okay, so passage 2, the Declaration of Independence. We have to find the key terms here, which is the Declaration of Independence, which is that one. Okay, so we have to read from the first sentence. It's rooted in the social contract theory. It was inspired by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Jefferson. Colonist